G'day there, welcome to this Mark's Reviews and Tutorials video. Today we are going to be doing the rear brakes on a BMW 1 Series. Now part number wise, these rear brakes are the same on a 3 Series, so part number's the same, it's going to be the same procedure. Step one, we've got to jack up the car, chop the front wheels and get this wheel off. Once you've got your wheel off, this is what you're going to be presented with. Here you can see the brakes. So if you look down here, the light on it, you can see these are really low. From the top of the shoe there should be a big chunky bit of pad, and there just isn't. I'll show you when they're off. Also, what you're looking for on the rotor here is this lip. When it gets too pronounced and too big, then this needs to be replaced as well. So just give it a bit of a look underneath. For instance, the bump stops up there clearly need to be replaced. I'll put a link through to those for you as well. The other thing worth doing while you've got the wheel off is to get some sandpaper and just clean up any rust around here, and even consider putting a bit of paint on it or a bit of WD-40 or something just to stop it from rusting, because when a wheel gets stuck on and you can't get it off, it's that point there. So once you get the wheel off, this is the bit you're presented with. Now what I suggest, the very first thing you do, obviously we've got to take the pads off and the arm and here everything off to change the rotor, but what I do suggest you do is actually check the tightness of this little nut here. This one, if it's tight and rusted in, oh my gosh, it can be an absolute disaster to get off. Something that I really strongly recommend, you get hold of these sockets. These are sockets with a little hex heads on them, and for this job they're just absolutely invaluable. It means that you can get on here and undo it. I've done this job before on BMW, just trying to use an Allen key and different tools. Oh my gosh, absolute disaster. Get yourself a set of these. Again, I'll put links in the description through to these. This is a socket and it makes this really quite easy to do. This is the part we're talking about here. This is the actual brake pad, and there's a few things we need to go through. Always on the rear, the handbrake operates on the rear brake, so you're going to have to let your handbrake off so that this releases, and we're also then going to have to undo some bolts around the back here. I'll show you where they are. But step one, undo the handbrake, and then we've got these carrier bolts here, and here. We can undo those pins, and that will allow this here to come undone. Now, if you're taking the rotor off as well, you also have to take off this metal bar, the frame that goes around the outside, and that's the bolts that are further in. They are here and here, and then that whole carrier arm will come off. Also, as soon as you're going to be putting your head underneath and working under here, which you're going to be doing, undoing these bolts and all the rest of it, you need a jack stand. I'll put a link through to that sort of stuff as well, but something so the car can't drop down and hurt you. Just a jack alone is not enough. Okay, so the way to get this top carrier bolt out, you're going to need a couple of spanners. You're going to need a 15, and if you see in here, this is actually the metal bracket. There's a bolt in there, and you need to get a spanner onto that so you can hold that in place and then turn this in the anti-clockwise direction to pull that carrier pin out. So holding this nut here and undoing this one, eventually this bolt here will come out like that and undo that top and bottom. Okay, so then once you've got both those bolts out, this center section here will come away, and you see the brake pads. Euro cars do tend to have a bit of a lip on here, and this is holding those brake pads in place. So you see the piston that's here? You can press that back. We can put a screwdriver on it, just give it a bit of a press, and that'll create a bit of space. So there you go. I just reached through from the front and put a bit of a spanner onto that, just gave a little bit of a press, and then this came off. And you'll see that the brake shoes are now sitting right there, and they also will come off. They will come out through these trays that are here, top and bottom. All this needs to be cleaned up. Out like that, and you'll see these have got very little meat left on them. This failed a roadworthy test, so they were too low to stay, which is fair enough. They would have got a bit more use out of them, but they need to be replaced. So here are these clips. If you didn't get clips with your brake kit and you're not replacing them, you just need to give them a good clean up and put some, this is where you put the grease so that this part of the brake pad here can slide freely backwards and forwards here to move both sides, front and back. That's the rear pad right there. And it's time to go to your new pads and just make sure that they're the same size, that the little wings are lining up and that they are in actual fact the right pads, and they are. And now you can see the thickness difference. Have a look at the thickness on the new pads there. That meat is all the way from there, all the way out. This one has just got that tiny little bit left. Now back under the car, be very careful of your brake line here. This is just a rubber brake line. Make sure you don't put too much pressure on that. But what we need to do is compress this piston back in. Oftentimes you can just muscle it back in, just two hands and press it back in. What we need to do is go under the bonnet and loosen off the brake cap and just allow that fluid level to go back. But if you can't do it just by hand, then you can put like a C-clamp on here. But normally it is just a matter of give it a good old press and that'll go back in. So there you go. Now there are of course brake recompression kits which have got a big washer which will sit under here and press this piston back. But the truth of the matter is, if you just get something big, even a bit of pipe or something, as long as you don't go anywhere near these rubber seals, you pinch that rubber seal or damage it, you're done for. But just across the front there, basically, this is a very backyarders way to do it, but just put the wrench in there like that, put it up against that face and lever it back. You do not need a lot of pressure and just a bit of time, and that just went slowly back in. Don't try and do it in a hurry because it's all going to go back up through your brake line and back into the reservoir. So just bring it back nice and slow. That's now open enough to get the new thicker pads. Obviously the little thin pads, this was pushed right in. With the thicker pads, you're going to need more room to be able to get this all back on. So now we're going to take these little clips out of here. You can see the base where it is down there. One of those in the top, one of those at the bottom. We're going to clean it all up. And we're going to put some grease on it and lube it, get it all ready for the new pads. Okay, so just a little screwdriver under the edge of that spring here and here, and that then lifts up and comes out like that. We're going to give that a clean up, just give this a bit of a blow up and a clean off as well. If you've got brake clean, now's the time to be spraying that around. The same on these. And then my brake pads came with a bit of special brake grease. You do have to use special brake grease. Okay, so we're giving those a clean and hit them up with the brake clean, put them back on again. Just make sure that you gap those. You see, there needs to be a gap between that clip and your brake pad. So just do that both sides. So make sure there's an even gap on both sides, because that's going to ring like crazy if you have that up too close and touching there. Top and bottom, do that. And then the next job, this is where the slide pins are. So pull that out. Just the rubber boot hooked over there should be all that's holding that back on. This is where we put our grease. These are the pins that come in and out when you're applying your brakes. So we need to make sure that they're clean and greased. What we need to do now is get some lube onto, this is where these ears run in here, on 4 spots. There, and there around the back into those trays. Find it best to put the lube onto a screwdriver or something like that and use that to get it into place. You obviously don't want to get any grease on your brake rotor here, and you don't want to get any onto your brake pads. I've got a refinement here because it's so hard to get around the back of this when it's actually up on there. Just put your grease on both sides here and then put the clip back in and just press it down where it goes. You'll get a really good coating of the grease both sides then.